Welcome back to Ordinary People Change the World. In today's episode, we are diving into Volume 3, I Am George Washington. He is one of the most important figures in American history. A leader, a soldier, and the very first president of the United States. But before all the fame and history books, George Washington was just a kid. A kid who learned lessons about honesty, courage, and leadership, lessons that made him the man who changed the world. So let's travel back in time to meet young George. George Washington was born in Virginia in 1732. He wasn't born rich or famous, he was an ordinary boy who loved the outdoors. He loved climbing trees, swimming in rivers, and riding horses. He wasn't perfect, he made mistakes like everyone else, but he always tried to do the right thing. One of the most famous stories about him tells how he chopped down his father's cherry tree. When his father asked who did it, young George said, "I cannot tell a lie. I did it." Now, historians say that story might not be true, but it represents something real about him, his honesty. Even as a boy, George knew that telling the truth was more important than avoiding trouble. As George grew older, he took responsibility seriously. When his father passed away, George helped his family on their farm. He studied hard, learned about land surveying, and worked to support his mother and siblings. He wasn't born a natural leader, he became one through hard work. People started to notice him not because he was loud or bossy, but because he was calm, fair, and dependable. Even as a teenager, George was the kind of person others trusted. In his early 20s, George joined the army. It wasn't easy, he faced danger, cold, and fear. He led soldiers during the French and Indian War. Even when things went wrong, he didn't give up. George learned what real leadership meant, standing beside your men, not above them. He made mistakes, yes, but he learned from them. He learned that true courage isn't about never being scared, it's about doing what's right even when you are scared. Years later, the colonies decided to fight for their freedom from Britain. And guess who they chose to lead their army? George Washington. He didn't ask for power, he was chosen because people trusted his honesty and his courage. Leading the American army was no small task. The soldiers were often cold, hungry, and outnumbered. But George never gave up. He inspired them to believe that freedom was worth fighting for. After years of struggle, the colonies won their independence. America was free. After the war, the people wanted George to be king. But he said no. He didn't fight for power, he fought for freedom. Later, when America needed a president, they turned to George again. He didn't want the job, but he accepted it because he knew his country needed him. As the first president of the United States, George Washington set an example. He treated people with respect. He believed in fairness. And after 2 terms, he stepped down, showing that no leader should hold power forever. That decision shaped democracy itself. So what made George Washington special? It wasn't that he was perfect. It wasn't his wealth or fame. It was his character, his honesty, his hard work, and his belief that leadership means serving others, not yourself. Brad Meltzer's Ordinary People Change the World reminds us that George Washington started as just an ordinary boy. But by choosing honesty, courage, and responsibility, he became extraordinary. And that's the message of this series, that you have that same power too. Every great leader, every world changer, starts somewhere small. You don't have to be famous to make a difference. You just have to be honest, brave, and kind, just like George Washington. Thanks for watching. That's all for today.